Hi, my name is Martina. I'm going to show you guys how to make iced chicory cold brew. So for this cold brew, we use our George Howell Monte Carlos coffee. And what you're going to do is you're going to start off by measuring out your coffee beans. And that's going to be 1,270 grams. The reason why we do that in grams is because it's a really tight and very to the gram recipe. So we want to make sure that it's precise. So you're going to go ahead and grind this on the largest grind size possible on your ditting or bun grinder. You want to do them on the larger grinder because it's such a large quantity of coffee, so you can't do it on your smaller Baratza grinder because you'll eventually burn it out. So once you've ground that, it has a much larger grind size, so you want to make sure that it's looking larger than your regular coffee. So once you've ground your coffee, you're going to measure out your chicory root as well. The chicory root is a much smaller quantity, but it's a very powerful flavor, and it gives this really rich chocolatiness to the cold brew. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to get my 12-quart container and my filters. So you're going to use two different filters for this. The reason is that if you don't use two filters, then there's a lot of sediment that stays in the coffee, and that will clog your line. So the two filters that you'll be using is, one is a coffee sock, and it's reusable. So after every use, you're going to wash it and clean it and hang it to dry. And you're going to use this every time. You can get about 100 batches out of this, so it's really important that you treat it well, and it'll last you longer. So I'm going to tie that over, and you're going to put it on top of your quart container. If you're using a round 22 quart, it's much easier, obviously, because the filter is round. The second filter you're going to use is a paper filter. These are not reusable, and you use them once per batch. They are also a lot more delicate, so you need to be careful with them, because if the filter breaks when you're straining it or when you're mixing the coffee grinds inside, it'll ruin the whole batch. So you put the coffee filter inside the coffee sock and just open it up. And then I'm going to pour my coffee grinds and my chicory root inside. So, and again, you want to make sure that all of your coffee grinds and chicory root are going only inside the paper filter. You don't want anything between the paper filter and the coffee sock, because then that defeats the whole purpose of having two filters. So the paper filter is what's really keeping all of the sediment inside of there, and what will prevent anything blocking your line. So this is my chicory. Okay. Then next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to gently mix them in there, and then I'm going to pour water over it. So it's really important that when you're pouring the water in there, that you're wetting all of the coffee grinds. So this is exactly like we do our pour over coffee, where you're blooming the grinds. So you're going to be pouring 7 quarts of water on there, and you want to make sure that all of the grinds are wet and that you're blooming the coffee. If you leave any pockets of coffee in there that's not wet, then you're not going to get the full extraction out of your coffee. You're going to go ahead and gently stir the coffee, and then you're going to pour your water in. Once you've bloomed your coffee and you've poured water over it, you're going to close the filters, and you're going to do this in 2 stages because they are 2 filters. But what you're going to try to do is actually close them together. So it's going to look a little bit like this, where you're going to crunch up the paper filter, always being super gentle because there's a lot of coffee in there, so that will break super easily, and again, it'll make your whole, it'll ruin your whole batch. So you're going to be, get this off now. All right, so I'm going to hold this, and then I'm going to, again, crunch up basically the cloth filter around the paper filter, so the paper filter stays up. That way there's no risk of that opening up. So I'm going to just do that. You also don't want to tie the bag too tightly, because then it'll create air pockets in there and you won't get the full extraction out of it. So you want to tie it just at the top so the coffee has enough room to move. At the front of the filter, you have this loop, and you're going to use that to close your bag with the other string. So what you do is you take the string and you loop it around the top nut, and then you bring the ribbon through that loop and pull on it, and that'll tie your coffee bag. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to leave this ribbon outside of the 22 quart. That way that, again, this knot has no risk of being wet, because you don't want any grinds coming out of it. So I'm just going to leave it on top of there. So to finish off your batch, you're just going to add water up to the 20 quart line, and you're going to let this brew for up to 18 hours. Don't worry if the filter comes up, if it floats, because in any case, as long as it's submerged in water, it'll continue extracting over that period of time. So the last thing you're going to do is you're going to cover your 22 quart, and you're just going to have the top go down, but you're going to keep the ribbon outside of the 22 quart. And then just close it, and you let it steep for about 18 to 20 hours. Now that my cold brew has been steeping for 18 to 20 hours, I'm going to go ahead and strain it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to strain it in a strainer in a 12 quart. You want to be even more delicate with this right now, because the paper filter is wet, and also the grinds are a lot heavier than when you originally started, because they absorb so much water. So when you strain it, you just want to pull it up pretty gently, and don't put any pressure on it. What you're going to do is you're going to put it in the strainer and leave it there for 10 to 15 minutes so that you can get all of that extra liquid out of the coffee grinds. I'm just going to let it sit there. So as you can see, there's a lot of concentrate coming out of the filter. So once that is done, you're going to add all of that concentrate back to your 22 quart and fill it up to the 20 quart line. Once you add water back up to the 20 quart line, then you can go ahead and fill your keg that has been already washed and rinsed, and your line has already been rinsed as well. All right, so I filled my keg with the cold brew, and now we're going to go ahead and close it and attach our line to it. So the best way that you can do this is to actually turn the lid and push it down. So you're going to turn the lid in the opposite direction and make sure that the rubber ring goes underneath. And then I'm going to turn it again so that it aligns with the actual shape of the top of the keg. Then I'm going to pull the keg up so that I'm holding it with the top of the ring, and I'm going to seal it and lock it by pushing down this lever on there. And this might be a little hard at the beginning, but you really have to push down to make sure it locks in. So once it's locked in, you want to make sure that this ring is also easily accessible. This is where you're going to be degassing the tank from. So you want to make sure that you're able to access this. You have three outlets on the keg. One is in and one is out, and then you have the top one. You're going to disregard the in part because you're going to be pushing nitrogen inside of the tank through the middle one, and you're going to be pulling chicory cold brew out of the out knob. So the way that you're going to do this is you're going to add your nitrogen, and this is going to go on the center one. The way that you attach it is you actually pull the lever up, and then you put it on top, and then it'll snap right into place once you push it down. There we go. So that's attached. You want to make sure that when you're doing this, your nitrogen tank is also off. So mine is off right now. Next up, you're going to attach your line for your cold brew. And this is going to go on the outside. And it's actually written on the side, so it's you guys can see it. So again, I'm going to push it up, and then I'm going to snap it right in. Last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my nitrogen on, and I'm going to degas the tank. All right. So what you're going to do, and you can also hear it, so you're going to degas the tank by pulling on the ring in 5-second bursts. And there you go. And usually when a little bit of the chicory comes out, it means that it's completely, you've completely pushed in the nitrogen in the tank. What that's going to do is that's going to allow the tank to release all of the oxygen in there and push nitrogen in with any space that's in there. This is really important because that's what's giving the bubbles to the cold brew, and it'll also allow the cold brew to have a longer shelf life, so it won't oxidize. So if you have a tank that you're not ready to serve yet, what you should do is degas it, put nitrogen inside of it, and then unhook it, and that'll give it a longer shelf life, and you'll be able to have a backup for your line. So now this is all set to go. You'll see that at the beginning when you first pour your cold brew, it's not going to have as many bubbles as it should. That's also because the tank needs to reach temperature. So it'll only produce the bubbles once it's completely cold. So you also, if you make a batch ahead of time and you degas it, you want to make sure that you're keeping it in your cooler to reach temperature faster. Now my cold brew is all set and ready to go.